All right, guys, welcome back to RTW's Wild History Ride. I'm Thomas.
I'm Will.
And I'm Rhonda.
And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about the real-life Jaws, the Jersey Shore shark attacks in 1916, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh,
And
man.
we're going to talk a little bit about the movie, just some of the tie-in and some of the influence that the shark attacks had, because this is literally the event that caused the fear of sharks in America.
I believe that, but also at the same time, I fear everything that I don't understand, and I don't understand sharks.
I think sharks are pretty interesting. But see, like you mentioned a while ago that you're not going to get in the water anyway.
No.
But I swim in the Tennessee River, and there's alligators and,
Snakes.
Well,
large fish.
water moccasins,
Thomas, you're used to the snakes in my own backyard at this point.
Oh, yeah, that was great. I was dog sitting for Will this week, and his older dog decided he needed to wrestle a snake. And he's sitting here just playing with it like my dog used to play with frogs the same way. He's grabbing this thing by its head,
That
flipping
thing is
it around.
big.
And it was about, his dog is about the length of my shin.
Well, you
and
used
this
to call
snake
him
was
a-
about twice the size of the dog.
Uh-huh.
And it was so funny because the snake would snap at him. He'd like try and get him, and your dog would snap him on the head the second he'd try and bite him. So he'd like, it was like the snake would pounce, and Huey would pounce back and
He was a good
get him
one.
on the head before he could bite him. It was
Well,
like,
and he's
"Stop it."
probably trying to defend Hooch and stuff at that point too. Like,
No, because he couldn't have cared less about what Hooch was doing, because
Aw.
Hooch was sitting there watching, and when the snake moved, he freaked out and ran to me and started peeing.
good
But-
for him. That's what I'd do.
But it was funny because the snake curled up and started doing that rolling thing they do when they die, and
He was faking
so I
it.
thought it was dead. So I threw the dogs in the house because I didn't want the dogs to play with the snake anymore. Also, I didn't want to risk them taking it in the house. And I went and got a hoe to make sure it was dead. And when I came back, that snake was gone.
Every house needs a hoe.
I have no comment. But I do want to mark the occasion because we are now over 250 downloads.
That's so cool.
And
Awesome.
We have downloads in France.
Yes,
That's crazy.
we do.
And
So-
with how badly I pronounce all of the names in the Princess Diana episode, I would like to formally apologize. This is my apology. There
To
will be
the
a
entire nation.
there will be a 4-part follow up, I'm sure. Whatever. But that's so cool.
But now we're in the U.S., Canada, Ireland, England, Australia, Germany, France. Am I missing anywhere?
Germany, that's a new one.
That is a new one. No, I think you've got it all. I think you've got it covered.
So we're getting out there. We're making some progress.
That's cool. That's cool. I'm just glad that that even if it's just for a split second, that you can have some influence somewhere else. That's cool.
Agreed. That is very cool. So with that being said, and us giving thanks to all of you for listening, we're going on with the episode.
Let's do it.
Sounds good. All right. So this occurred the summer of 1916 on the Jersey Shore, as Thomas pointed out. And we start off first, July 1st, 1916. 25-year-old Charles Vanzant is killed by a shark when he's swimming in only 3.5 feet of water.
Oh, wow.
He's at the resort town of Beach Haven, and he was out for just an afternoon swim, a typical day. And he'd gone out, and the shark bit his left leg, wouldn't let go of Vanzant. And the shark, there was a human chain of people trying to help him get out of the water, and they were pulling him back towards shore. And the shark was literally refused to let go of his leg, and was dragged almost to the shore itself. Its stomach was dragging the sandy bottom of the beach as this guy was being dragged along. But needless to say, with his left leg being severed basically by the shark, this young man died on the shore right there in front of at this resort town. And if you read any of the accounts in the New York Times, it was, I wouldn't know if I'd say fairly graphic, but I was kind of surprised at the
Level of
level
detail.
yes.
at the level of detail, because I was reading a couple of the different articles about these shark attacks, and I was kind of surprised. And they were talking about the bleeding and dying and women fainting and all this. But anyway,
fainting.
it was interesting to say the least to see what was printed at that time.
Well, and it's weird, Rhonda, did you come across anything that said, it makes me wonder, because I guess I always think, I don't know, I guess sharks aren't always necessarily just out to get humans, like, or anything.
No,
Like,
they usually don't care about us.
is it like a territorial thing? Like, do you think like he disturbed like a
From what I understand about sharks, it wouldn't be. Usually, it would be. It depends on the type of shark. It also depends on the level of food they've had recently.
Oh yeah,
So
like
if it's
he was
if
hungry.
it's a lean period, it might attack us. But usually, we're pretty low on the
The food scale or
on
food
their
chain.
desire
whatever.
to eat us.
Mm-hmm.
I think, well, like we have several people that have been attacked while surfing, and I think it's the shape of the surfboard that
Oh.
leads them to attack it.
Maybe it thinks like it's a
because
weird
usually
fish
if
or
you're
something.
flailing around, the sharks really. I might be wrong, but what I've always been told was if you're flailing around, the sharks don't want you because they think you're something bigger.
Yeah.
They misinterpret it as
Like
something
bears,
bigger.
like, make
'Cause
yourself
they don't,
bigger.
They don't really have sight. They have kind of like a sensory
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So yeah, it's. I don't know what would have caused it.
That's so sad though, man. I mean, it's just like you go out for a swim and just
But
don't come back.
We also, do we even know if it was one shark that did all the attacks or?
Well, we don't know. We don't know for sure. And I'll have some comments after I go through the list of attacks as to what possibly, I don't know if I'd say motivation for these sharks, but what could have caused these attacks and whether or not it was one shark and what type shark it was. There's also some controversy. Was it a white shark or
Shark
or a bull
or
shark? Exactly what kind of shark was it? But needless to say, we'll move on with this and go ahead and describe the rest of these attacks. So that was on July 1st, 1916. 5 days later, 27-year-old Charles Bruder was killed about 45 miles north of Beach Haven. He had swum out beyond the lifelines. He was a very good swimmer. He actually worked at the at Spring Lake where he was attacked, and he was a good swimmer, and he went out almost daily for a swim. He was very comfortable with being out in the water. He was about 130 yards offshore when he was attacked. He called for help. 2 lifeguards who had been watching him because they had saw how far out he had gone.
Yeah, 130 yards.
It was a good way out. So 2 lifeguards launched a boat, but they were unable to save him. They got to him, pulled him into the boat, and both of his legs had been bitten off.
Wow.
So, obviously that he had
Yeah.
bled out, shock, bleeding. There was, what could you do?
Yeah.
So at that point, protective nets were starting to be installed along the beach because people were starting to be concerned, and boats were starting to patrol the waters there. Now, the next attack occurred 25 miles south of Spring Lake on July 12th. Now, that was 11-year-old Lester Stillwell. He was attacked by the shark. He was at a popular swimming hole at Matawan Creek. Now, the swimming hole was a mile inland. Now, I hope I pronounced this correctly, a mile inland from Raritan Bay. The shark grabbed Lester. There were other boys swimming in the area, and they saw the shark grab Lester by his stomach as he was floating on his back, and he was pulled under. The rest of the boys ran into Matawan's Main Street to get help. 24-year-old Stanley Fisher joined the group who headed back to the scene to see what they could do to find Lester, to see what they could do to help. Stanley took a rowboat out and was probing the water with a pole, trying to find Stillwell's body. He spotted Lester's body, and even though the shark was possibly still around, he dove into the creek to retrieve it. Now, the shark appeared, as we could have guessed.
As it always does.
Yes, and bit Stanley's right leg. He was dragged ashore by other people there, rescuers who were trying to help, but he died shortly after that also.
That sounds literally like a horror movie.
Well, it
It
sounds like
does,
Jaws.
it
It
does.
sounds
Yeah,
exactly like how
that's,
Jaws, starts and stuff.
Okay, so then about 30 minutes after the attack on Stanley Fisher, 12-year-old Joseph Dunn was bitten on the leg by a shark. Now, he was near the mouth of Matawan Creek. He survived, fortunately. It wasn't that much of a severe bite, I guess, and he survived. Now, 2 days later, and of course, there was obvious panic at this point because there was what was going on at this time. The Northeast was in a heat wave, so there were a lot of people at the beach in July, wanted to get into the water. So they were just terrified as to what was going on. But 2 days later, Michael Schleicher caught a shark off the shore at South Amboy, and this is New Jersey again. He had a dragnet, and that's what he caught the shark in. And when he got the shark ashore, he gutted it. Supposedly, and this was never verified, but supposedly human bones were found inside the shark. Now, whether or not this shark was responsible for the attacks, not 100% sure, but there were no more shark attacks the remainder of that summer on the New Jersey coast.
Wow, it sounds almost like, inspiration for the movie right there.
Yeah, but you also got to remember, sharks are kind of like a living garbage disposal. They'll eat anything.
True.
So, and Jersey kind of has a reputation for body dumps, or at least it used to back during mafia days. So you never know if there were just bodies already in the water, or if someone had drowned and the shark was just eating it. So you can't really, unless they compare, they wouldn't be able to find out.
Which, at that time, too, DNA and stuff wasn't a thing
I mean,
anyway.
like, compare the bones.
Oh,
'cause
yeah.
obviously,
yeah.
the people that died from it, their bodies were recovered.
Yeah.
So if you have the bones, you can actually check and see if they fit.
True, that is true. Now, of course, this summer, or during that summer, there were a lot of shark sightings. Whether or not they were actually sharks, we don't know, but people felt like they had seen sharks in the water. There were a lot of people out in their boats patrolling the waters, shooting at sharks or what they felt like were sharks. But there were several sharks caught during this attack period. So again, several sightings. Obviously, a nervous population, very much so. Now, what's funny is previous to these attacks, many scientists believe that sharks were too shy to attack humans, or they didn't have the capability to bite through bone. So this definitely changed the view of that, and sparked an interest in learning more about these sharks and what was going on and just how dangerous they really could be. And Thomas, you were asking some of the reasons why this may have happened. Well, remember now, this is 1916, so World War I was going on in Europe. And one of the thoughts were that the passenger ships that typically traveled to and from New York would throw food items, refuge over the sides, and the sharks would feed on it. And with the war in Europe, the passenger ship travel had really decreased. So the sharks, one thought is the sharks were looking for other food sources.
Of course.
And also another thought is there's something, and I'm not familiar with this fish. I don't know what it is, but apparently there was overfishing of what's called a moss bunker off the Jersey shore, which seems to be something that the fish enjoy. It was a big part of their food supply, and that had been overfished, and that particular fish is used for oil and compost. So that may have affected the shark's food supply.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've learned too in just like basic biology classes, and just upsetting any part of some kind of food chain. I mean, if you don't give it what it needs, like the prey that it needs, it's going to look for prey elsewhere.
Yep.
And one captain who was from Bermuda had brought his boat up to the area around this time, and he said on the way up, he said the waters were teeming with fish from Bermuda all the way up to Sandy Hook, which apparently is where he took his boat. And he said that could have been what caused the sharks to come in from the Atlantic. He thought maybe it was just more food available to them, and that's what prompted this. But, again, we don't know. We don't know. Maybe there were always more shark. Maybe this was just a rogue shark. I have no idea. I can say I was in San Diego several years ago, and at that point there was some, I want to say, nurse shark or something in the water, and I had seen the News at 5 or News at 6 doing a shot from a helicopter showing the number of shark in the water. Now, they weren't dangerous, but they were everywhere. I mean, just all in the water.
So I would not be in there.
So we have no idea if how much the shark population was, whether there's swarms of shark again, or was this just one rogue shark, which maybe that's kind of what it sounds like. But then when you have shark sightings and other sharks caught, maybe not. Maybe there was more in the water at that time.
Yeah.
But those are the attacks that occurred the summer of 1916.
It's like, and thinking of, and not saying, at all, because I don't blame any kind of victim of that. Like, you can't ever, you never know when you'll be of a victim of some kind of unforeseen circumstance or something. But, just thinking about it, it might have been completely preventable, especially after those first couple. I would have been like, hey, let's take a step back or something.
Yeah, let's stay out of the water for a little while and decide what we're going to do. kind of thing.
Which, I was thinking, like, whenever that first attack happened, I was like, well, maybe he, like, upset, like, some kind of, I don't know, like, I don't know, do sharks have, like, breeding areas or whatever? I don't know. I don't know anything about sharks much.
Yeah,
like,
I'm not that informed on sharks.
I was like, well, maybe it was, like, a territorial thing.
It
like,
could have been.
Well, but I don't know. I mean, the first attack occurred in 3.5 feet of water, which sounds, I don't know, for that to be,
3.5 feet.
It doesn't sound like it.
for a habitat. I'm not really sure.
No.
So that would be like what, waist high on me, maybe? I guess.
Yeah, it'd be about waist high on both of us.
Yeah. So I mean, like, you just don't think that that's really deep. Well, I guess that is deep enough. I guess it just doesn't sound like it would be.
It's deep enough for a shark to attack, but it doesn't sound deep enough for a shark to consider its habitat.
Yeah.
Or even really its hunting ground.
Yeah, it's just like, why are you 3.5, like, at some kind of area where like 3.5 feet of water is like where you're attacking somebody?
Yeah, I don't think that's likely, unless something had caused it to, in recent months, relocate its hunting grounds or habitat.
Mm-hmm.
I find it unlikely that was the cause. From the sound of it, I would probably be more willing to subscribe to the change in level of food, or food scarcity being a big problem.
Yeah.
So I'd probably stick with that thought.
I wonder how big. How do they know how big that? Did you say how big that shark was, Rhonda? That was caught.
I really don't have that in my notes. I want to say it was like maybe 7 feet, but I'm not 100% sure on
Which
that. I'd have to go
big,
back.
But I mean, I feel like there's a lot of sharks out there that are bigger.
Yeah,
for sure.
well, it depends on the species. Because do you know what species it was?
No, they're not sure. Actually, he had the shark stuffed, but it's disappeared over time. So they have a picture, a kind of a blurred picture of the shark, but they don't know for sure what it was.
Gotcha. Yeah, because you and I are both 6 foot.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's a foot bigger than us. But
What?
I mean that sounds big, but it also doesn't, because when you think about, like, you see movies like Jaws where the shark is as big as a boat.
Yeah.
And you're like,
a little bit overdone.
Yeah. Okay, that's terrifying. But then you think, okay, I'm not even half the size of most boats. No.
Well, I'm just thinking, shoot, that snake that you sent me of the picture with Huey in it, that looked very big. So I mean, I guess
I would say, yeah. If I laid down, it would probably be 3/4 my length.
I guess
Yeah.
the funny, like, I'm not very. I think I'm afraid of sharks in the sense of, like, I've seen movies like Soul Surfer and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
that you could always be a victim of some kind of attack.
Yeah, things happen. I mean, you
It
never
does.
know. You never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to set something off.
No, I
it's
know.
like, well, I mean, I have the same thoughts about people and dogs. You never know what's going to happen. That's why
That's true.
That's why I tell people not to have a very small child around dogs, because you never know how a dog's going to react. Mm-mm. And you may think, oh, no, I've traded this dog to be my best friend. Well, yeah, your dog could think it's protecting your kid and rip your kid up.
Well, also dogs have instincts.
Yeah.
I mean, they have those instincts, especially if because I mean, you've heard of people, like, I remember watching CSI and stuff back in the day. There would be episodes where the dog ate the human or something like
Yeah.
that. I'm like, at the end of the day, the dog is an animal. It's going
do
to
what
have
it needs to do to survive.
to
It's going
survive.
to do what it needs to protect its own. So when you talk about animals, I don't think we think that we understand animals. We don't.
Well, you always say, I want a tiger. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, no, you don't
No,
want a
you
tiger.
don't.
Yeah.
I mean, you see Tiger King, you're like, I want to, like, do all of the people, like, on the tigers and stuff. And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I would rather die than have a tiger.
Yeah,
Or a
I
shark,
agree
by
with
the
you.
way. Like, that's it.
100% agree.
Now, are you saying that just as a normal person or as your experience as an RN? You just don't want to see what could be the result of that?
Well, luckily, I said, I'm not really privy to seeing, like, tiger stuff, or anything. But I mean, like, seeing what they can do and what they do to other animals that are a lot bigger than me. Just safe to say, like, they're majestic and beautiful. And, I think sharks are majestic and beautiful, but I do not want to ever have a shark or a tiger. Because, like, I don't believe in owning anything that's bigger than you. I don't believe in owning horses. Like, I mean, like, no offense. Like, I don't trust a horse.
Hey, my dad always says, horse is trying to either kill you or itself.
No, I know. I'm just like, listen. So that's just my thing on that.
Yeah.
Well, let me throw one more thing out. And I was telling you what some of the reasons may have been for these shark attacks. There was also a conspiracy theory, and remember, this was during World War I. America hadn't gotten into the war yet, but it was definitely going on in Europe. And one of the conspiracy theories were the shark were trained by Germans to follow their U-boats and attack
that.
beachgoers.
Listen, what you know? It's funny. Like, what? Not funny. I mean, gosh, but what if they ended up being true? Like, you know.
Well, you've heard the conspiracy that birds aren't real and that they were all
they're
to
like
extinction.
man-made.
So all birds that we see are man-made and they're actually recording devices.
Yeah, like from the government or whatever.
The government, Big Brother watching you.
Maybe we need to do a show on conspiracy theories.
That's the next one. That's the next one.
Well, my little bit of notes is not nearly as comprehensive as Rhonda's because I'm just going to talk about a little bit of the tie-in with the movie, such as I believe in the movie there were 4 people attacked. 4 people attacked in the movie before they start the real shark hunt. So 4 people dead, just like the real event. And there was also a scene where, like you said, the shark in the real life event went up inland.
Yes, it went a mile inland
Into some
and
brackish water, which is,
right.
For those who don't know, brackish water is, or I guess it'd be briny water, whatever the term is. It's a mix between salt and fresh water. Mm-hmm. So there are some saltwater fish that can survive in it. So
as long as they have that little bit of salt water.
Yeah, as long as there's enough for them to survive, they'd have to go back into the salt water eventually, but they could survive it. So in the movie, the shark actually makes it into what they call the pond, which is nothing like what the real life event was, because the real life event, he went like a mile inland and attacked in this brackish water, whereas in the movie, it's like you can see it from the beach.
Yeah.
It's like a big pond. There's like a little reservoir that's just big enough for this giant shark to make it through and get into this other, like a small pond of salt water that is just there because of the way the land is shaped.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where he attacks the sheriff's kid. And then there's also, they actually do reference the 1916 attacks in the movie where the sheriff, Brody, and the marine biologist, Hooper, are trying to convince the mayor that they need to close down the beaches for 4th of July, like 1916.
Yeah.
Because it happened around 4th of July, right?
Yes.
July 1st through what?
Let's see.
It
The
was
final attack was about
July 6th or 7th?
12th.
July 12th. So they're trying to convince him to close down the beaches after 2 people have already died. And I do remember that scene. I remember being so mad about that, but that they didn't listen. But,
Well, he's got to make money. It's a business.
But the quote is, the marine biologist starts off with, "Look, the situation is that apparently a great white shark has staked claim in the waters off Amity Island, and he's going to continue to feed here as long as there's food in the water." The sheriff then adds in, "And there's no limit to what he's going to do. I mean, we've already had 3 incidents, 2 people killed inside of a week, and it's going to happen again. It happened before, the Jersey Beach, 1916, 5 people chewed up on the surf." So they do reference it. So it is a little bit of inspiration to the events, even if you don't really want to claim it as much, because you want to kind of have that, oh, it's my own idea.
Yeah.
It's not.
Well, I have to say, I saw the movie in theaters when it came out.
Ooh.
I don't recall that line in the movie.
So fun.
But I was much younger than I should have been to go see a movie that was that violent.
That's so fun.
And it scared the bejesus out of me, and I had nightmares for a week. So maybe that did not resonate.
That's what Mom says,
now,
too.
the falling limbs in the water and the head rolling out of the boat, I remember that. But
yeah. Well, in 1975, you would have been barely a teenager. Well, you might not have, depending on when it was in 75, you wouldn't have even been a teenager. So.
Right. Well, I was 13. Yes.
Yeah,
but still way too young to go see that kind of a movie. And I have to thank one of my older cousins who
Did they sneak
took
you
me
in?
along with her children. No, she didn't sneak me in, but
Well, see,
I was still way too young for that.
you got to remember our family's a little bit oddly stacked. So her first cousin had kids that were her age.
Oh, I see. Like, mom, my mom, like, she went to see the movie and everything. She was around, she was a little bit older than Rhonda, but she went with family members and stuff too. And she was so scared. She was like, I could take a shower or whatever. I could not do a bath, like any kind of water. Like, I was afraid he'd come out of the drain. I'm like,
I remember the first time I watched it, we still had a pool. And I like to swim at night because usually with the pool, the water's warmer at night.
Yeah.
So I would swim around, and I remember I had just watched the movie. I would have been like 14, 15, something like that the first time I saw it. And I remember being so freaked out because I was under the water, and for those of you who don't know, I have bad vision, and I saw this shape when I was under the water that looked somewhat like a shark, and it was just a shadow the way the clouds were that night. It was just a shadow in the water. And I remember not wanting to get in the deep end because I was convinced there was somehow a shark in my pool.
I mean, that would be our luck.
At 10 o'clock at night.
Well, and it's funny because, I remember, do you remember watching the show, like Courage the Cowardly Dog back in the day?
Definitely.
Well, there was that one episode, I think it was one of the earlier ones. I remember, like, the whole premise was, you remember, like, the first episodes were, like, the cat that he had, like, Mr. Cat, so I think was his name.
Yeah.
Well, he had in a later episode, it was a hotel that they stayed at for a night. And I remember, I think Muriel was like in the tub, and she was in a bath and everything. Well, all of a sudden, like 2 or 3 spiders just come out of the faucet.
I remember,
That's been one. I'm like, that's a fear. Like the sharks are a fear. Like it's just, it's ingrained.
I'm always freaked out that a snake's going to come up through my drain.
Or the toilet. The toilet's
Well, that's what I mean, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Because Australia, I think that happens, or not Australia. I don't know. It's
There's somewhere that it does happen fairly regularly. Somehow a tank gets into the sewage lines and will come up, because apparently they don't have to breathe that often, so it can come up through the water. So it's like,
okay, now that is not something I've ever thought of.
There's your mental image.
We're kind of lucky because our toilets are to a septic tank. So if a tank's coming up through there, it's been living in our septic tank for a while.
You mean a shark? I mean a snake.
I just said snake, didn't I?
Oh, did you say a shark coming up through your septic tank?
I thought I said snake coming up.
I don't know. You probably did.
But yeah, so we have a septic tank. We don't have to worry about that. The only thing we got to worry about is our fresh water.
So what you're saying is I have to worry about that? Because I don't think I have a septic tank.
No, you are 100% on sewer.
Yep.
Yes, you do. And you already have snakes coming through your chimney, so.
Well, listen, no, not anymore. I said that we plugged that chimney off as soon as that happened. The day of, I'm pretty sure, like the day after.
I just remember your mom saying, "I'm getting the gun," and your dad going, "You can't shoot in the house." My daddy did all the time. My grandpa did all the time.
Well, yeah, it was like she was like, "Oh yeah, my uncle."
Oh, it was uncle. Okay, yeah.
I think I was like, well,
it
it might have been her grandfather, because she said that the grandmother would be chucking him out the window, like, and she'd be like, he'd be shooting in the house, I'd be chucking him out the window.
Okay, it sounds like we need an episode of people's fears.
Or just like our family stories.
Histories.
Yeah, family history. But I kind of mentioned this to you guys too. Like, there's actually a Mandela effect with the movie as well. Like the whole Mandela effect, for anybody that doesn't know, is basically
it's where you remember things inaccurate to history, such as Darth Vader. The quote you remember is, "Luke, I am your father." No, it was actually, "No, I am your father," that kind of thing.
I'm like, listen, I don't know who that Darth Vader was. I was like, it sounded good. Let's see. There was, so the quote that they say, the misquote that we always say is, "We're going to need a bigger boat."
Yeah.
Is that's what, and I for some reason, I like feel as if I've heard that one before.
I do too.
But the actual quote is, "You're going to need a bigger boat." Because I thought it was like,
come on,
was
throw
there.
on the accent, that grizzled sailor accent.
Oh, you know me,
yeah.
just that grizzled sailor.
Try it. Just try it.
I was like, Thomas, you're the voice actor of the two,
Yeah.
Of the two of us. But I'm just, that's really interesting. But it goes to show, I feel like Jaws especially, like, I kind of hate that it ended up getting the treatment that it got with like Jaws 4, whatever.
They went a little bit overboard with the sequels and everything.
Robo Jaws. They do. But it's like everything. Now they have that, Piranhas movie. It's like, they'll take everything and turn it into something.
Sharknado 23.
They do have Sharknado. Listen, Tara Reid, I'm telling you, making all that money.
Hey, I don't fault her for it. She didn't work for a while, so hey,
I know it.
Make that money.
Well, I think that's interesting, though. But any other notes, Rhonda, that you know of?
Speaking of the movie, I believe Jaws was the first summer blockbuster.
So does that mean, like, what does summer blockbuster necessarily mean?
Like a Marvel movie kind of thing.
Yeah, I know, but like, is there a definition?
Well, I can look one up if you want.
I would say very successful.
Just like
basically an anticipated movie that comes out in the summer. You know how every year you and I see a crap ton of movies.
We
right?
do not as much anymore.
No, well, that's because of COVID. But But always around summertime and the holidays, there's a bunch of movies.
Yeah, yeah.
So a summer blockbuster would be one of those movies that you go and watch in the summer. That's highly anticipated. So hold on a second. Let me see if there's a.
Yeah, I was wondering because I was like, because summer blockbuster, I'm gonna say it's probably like they have their budget, they make so much of a budget back or whatever. Yeah, I was wondering. I was like, it's cool though, just thinking that wasn't always a thing. Like I would always think that like things like back in the day, like Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz, like that, which I don't know if they came out in the summer, but that would have been like a super hit, mega hit, back in the day.
A summer blockbuster is intended to be an event. It is a thing you wait all year for. That's hyped up to the nines. It's the reason you go to the movies.
Okay.
So yeah.
So yeah, just a Marvel movie. Like that's it.
More or less, yeah.
More or less on there. That makes sense. I was like, but that's interesting, Rhonda. Anything else that you found out cool-wise in your research?
I don't know if it was necessarily cool, but it was a comment that Thomas had made. They didn't know if it was a white shark or a bull shark.
And there were even like stories that it could have been a tiger shark and some other things too.
Possibly. But going back to the attack at Matawan Creek, one of the reasons they thought it could have been a bull shark is because it was a mile inland, and they didn't think a white shark could go that far inland away, I guess, from the actual salt water. Yes. But at that point, they pointed out that there was a higher tide and a full moon, so it may have been more salt than usual in the creek. Oh. So they couldn't rule out that it wasn't a white shark. And again, and unfortunately, again, they don't have the stuffed shark that was actually killed that they thought was the attacker. Just a picture. When I'd have to go back and look at a picture, but obviously I wouldn't be informed enough.
Like how many miles away? Like it was. I forgot because you said the attacks were kind of spaced out, right?
They were, but this one was a mile inland of
Matawan
I see what
Creek.
You're saying. Now the initial. Let's see. Let's go back here. The initial attack was at the resort town of Beach Haven in 3.5 feet of water, and then the final attack was at Matawan Creek. Which let's see. The first attack at Beach Haven, second attack 5 days later, and that was at Spring Lake. And then the final attacks were at Matawan Creek, and they were, so the Spring Lake was 45 miles north of Beach Haven.
Okay.
And Matawan Creek was 25 miles north of that.
That's crazy. I mean, it spanned a good long ways. Like you think it would just be
pretty good distance to cover.
Which makes me think that it was probably more sharks, instead of just maybe one.
I could see that, but at the same time, once that one died, the attacks did stop.
That's
so
true.
You have to, if you're just going based off of what happened, you'd have to just assume that it was the one shark doing all this damage.
I like the conspiracy from the German one. I like that. Well, but also I think too, like I guess Jaws. I always kind of equate Jaws as being the one where you have an animal that goes on the attack, but I always forget about birds with Tippy Hedren and stuff.
Birds!
My goodness.
That movie is the reason I am afraid of birds.
Oh, I don't like birds either. I think that goes just with all of our families here.
Well, I remember it very clearly because I was fairly young. I don't think I was in double digits yet. And I watched Birds with you. And our cousin, like within a few days, picked up me and took me and his two kids, to the Birmingham Zoo.
And they have birds in the zoo?
Apparently. And we were going through the
Thomas
aviary.
found them, obviously.
We were going through the aviary. And our cousin
okay.
Brian had birds all over him, just walking around, and I'm sitting here so close to having a panic attack just because these birds are all over my cousin. I'm like,
was it like a parrot?
Old.
Like a parrot?
Dude, I don't remember.
Parrots are cute, though.
I was so over it because I had just watched Birds like less than a week before.
I guess the only bird I really equate with birds is like a blackbird, right? Like I wonder, like blackbirds. I don't know. I feel like
there were
it was
a lot
just
of
the black
blackbirds.
and white.
There were chickens. There were
chickens.
Because what was it that took out her eyes?
The neighbor's eyes? No, I don't think it was chickens. Remember and this is kind of off subject.
Sorry.
The chickens didn't like their feed, and that's what started that conversation. So she went to check on the next door neighbor who complained of the same thing to see what he was doing, and that's when she found the neighbor who had his eyes pecked out. But I don't think it was the chickens. I think it was the blackbirds that they kept
I just
showing
think of blackbirds
on the lines and on the roofs of the houses, that kind of thing.
I just think of her in that phone booth. I'm like,
Oh my
Tippy
God,
Hedren,
that
by
was
the way,
horrifying.
bless her heart, she went through so much in that filming.
Yeah. I think we've gone way off topic now.
We have. I like it,
So,
though. I like it.
On that note, I think it's time for us to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for so many downloads and for expanding our audience to other countries.
And I want to give a shout out to my cousin Mike and also Bo Hutchinson Realty out in Atlanta, Georgia. So if anybody ever needs to buy a house out there, that's where you need to go to. But yeah, thank y'all so much, and we hope that we can continue. And we got a lot more exciting shows planned and ideas, so we're excited.
So catch you next time.
Until then.
Until then, you guys.